that there are constituents that want to talk about this ride, the future of the Slingshot group, and so I just wanted to provide this forum for that to happen. So with that, again, I just want to thank you. If you want to say something to open, and then we'll start the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Senator, thank you so much for this opportunity, and we're here to listen. I mean, that's why I'm here. This has been a very important, obviously, impact on this community, and we are obviously in the middle of a very, very intense investigation to the whole situation, and have been very upfront and transparent about where we are with the investigation, and where we want to make sure that we have answers and get complete and thorough answers. So I just wanted to make sure that I was here to listen and to make sure that there was a forum for us to have this conversation and to hear from you all. So I'm just excited to have been given this honor to be part of this conversation.
So with that, LaVon, I'll let you start if you have a question or a thought.
Good morning. My name is LaVon Bracey Davis, and quite honestly, I just sit before you as a concerned community citizen. I mourn the death of this 14-year-old young man, and I'd really love to know if this organization, if this company had the opportunity to reopen, what is your office's thoughts? What is the next step? What would your office's position be on reopening or even creating new rides? As I mourn this young man's death.
I mean, that's obviously what we're going through now. We have to follow the law and the statutes, and so that's why we're doing a complete investigation on the company, on the rides themselves, and it's an ongoing. And then the results, when it comes out of the investigation, we'll have to make a determination based on what I have the power to do. I mean, I can't overstep my power either, but that's why I want to hear kind of what everybody's thoughts are in this conversation.
Anyone else?
In a hypothetical situation, that my concern is I want to make sure that whatever decision is made with the thought of the families who have lost people at the hands of this company. I think it's important that we not erase the history of this young man or the others who have suffered from what I would consider gross negligence. And so in a hypothetical situation that you have completed an investigation, where do you think, what do you think the next steps for the company in Central Florida are?
The whole point of all of this is to make sure that we're doing right by the people and honoring this young man's life and the recognition of the impact that it has not only on his family but those in this community. And so, the statutes give me only a certain amount of power, and so we want to make sure that we are doing everything possible to hold everybody accountable, and that's why there's also lawsuits that have been filed in this case to go after, if there happened to be negligence. That is not my place to make that determination. That's for the courts and for the attorneys. My job is as a regulator and to oversee the process. And of course, if this company is deemed to have been negligent, then we have certain power. But that's kind of where we are. And so I certainly, that's why I want to hear what's happening on the ground, and certainly want to do everything we can, because we are not going to erase his memory. We want to honor it and honor the impact that it's having here, which is why we're here listening.
Can I ask, I know there may be some limitations on what you can say about the investigation, but to the degree you can talk about the investigation, where are we in that process? And I don't know if you can speak to how long you expect for the investigation to go. Just if you can kind of just walk us through that.
Yeah, so we, as you all know, as soon as we have done the preliminary investigation, that we've put out all the reports, everything is online and completely accessible to everybody. And so the first stage of the investigation is kind of complete, but that's where we had the expert that came in. They did the expert analysis on the ride. We are going one step further, and we're doing a full analysis of the ride, and so we're not putting a timeline on this. You know, we're not, because we want to make sure we get to the bottom and get to the answers. And if it takes longer because we're doing a deep dive, then it's going to take longer. But we are not going to rush this. We want to make sure that we are doing everything possible to get to the bottom of what happened, who made the authorizations, and work within our parameters. But we are still in the middle of it, and so we are also looking at all the different aspects of the ride and the company itself, and and disseminating that information as much as we get possible, as fast as we can. Because we want to be transparent, we want to do a thorough investigation, and the family deserves to know everything. And so we want to make sure that we are getting to the bottom of everything. And so unfortunately, there is no timeline.
Right.
We don't want to put a false timeline in if our investigation isn't complete. And we are certainly working with the expert group that we hired. And I have instructed my team, because there were 2 paths that we could have gone through. And I've instructed my team to do the full and thorough investigation.
Gotcha. Anyone else?
Just another quick question. First, I think I was really remiss in saying thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your time, and I appreciate you being so available and here to listen. Has the family been updated? You gave some really good updates on the due diligence of your office. And I don't know if it's appropriate, but has the family heard any of this in terms of the timeline?
Yeah, we are in constant communication with not necessarily the family, but now that they have representation and have attorneys, and so they're in constant communication. And the second we get any information, the second that we are done with any part of our stuff, it's immediately going over to the attorneys to make sure that they are up to speed. And I'm assuming that they're telling their client everything that we are. So again, we're an open book. We want to be as transparent. We want to give information out. We know the sensitivity of all of this. There's nothing to hide from our perspective. So we are going to put it all out there. Let the attorneys do their job, and then we're going to do ours and make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Okay. Anyone else?
So
go ahead.
when it comes to timeline, just as a citizen as well, as it gets longer, sometimes the sentiment is people forget about it. And we already see that the memorial is being moved, or there is no memorial anymore. So what I don't want is for tourists to come from around the world to Orlando and not realize the importance that, yes, we value tourism, but we also value life.
Yep.
And we don't want companies that are negligent in their procedures to have a say and have rides continue to be in our city. If you are negligent and you are not making sure that it's safe for anyone, then you don't deserve to be on that drive.
And just so you know, no one's forgetting. No one's forgetting. Okay? No one's forgetting. And it will, as long as I am in this position, no one's going to forget. And we're going to continuously make sure that the memory is uplifted, and his life is still celebrated, and that we are going to make sure, because you're absolutely correct, that tourism is our #1 driver of our state, but we got to do it safely, and we got to make sure that we're doing it right. And if there is found to be negligence on behalf of the company, per the statutes, we'll make the decisions at that point. And certainly working with our colleagues in the legislature, that if there's things that I don't have the control and power over, or there's things that need to be changed, that was a commitment that I know that Senator Thompson and I also had, and I'm sure Senator Racy as well, to make sure that we're doing everything right. And that if changes need to be made to statutes, it will be a partnership that will come from our office with the legislature to make the changes. Because safety has always got to be the #1 priority. Always. Because we shouldn't be experiencing a tragedy like this. And we certainly are going to do everything possible. I still have to sleep at night, and I can't sleep at night knowing that potentially I'm putting another child's life at risk and another family to lose a loved one. So you have my commitment that we are going to make sure that we are never going to forget, and that we're going to continue to remind this community that we're going to be here every step along the way.
Alex, I think you had a question. But
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Commissioner, for taking this issue so seriously. Speaking about legislation, is there any kind of additional safeguards that come to mind when thinking about how to prevent tragedies like this in the future?
Yeah, certainly. We're certainly going through things, and I also want this to be kind of a separate bifurcated conversation on that answer, because the lawsuits and the investigation will determine if any of these precautions could have prevented it. That is not what I'm going to. I am not in a position to make that ultimate determination. That's going to eventually be potentially a jury, but certainly we are now looking at other things that for the future are things that we would recommend, that we potentially saw loopholes in the statutes that say, well, maybe that should have happened. Maybe there should have been more signs, maybe on roads or other types of issues. So, but we cannot make the determination of causation and whether or not any of these additional statutes that, if altered, would have prevented this. All we're going to do now is say, give that information out to the family, give it out to the court system and the juries. But certainly we're going to look at ways to make sure that there's additional precautions put in place. So we are certainly looking at those options. But again, I want to make it very clear, we're not saying that if in fact this had been done, that this would have been would have prevented this tragedy.
Hi, Commissioner. Can you explain more about the department's role in regulating these rides and where the authority comes in, when you can step in and actually shut down a ride if there has to be a problem with when we inspect it in order for that to happen?
Right. So it's a kind of an interesting process that sometimes doesn't make the most sense. But we come in, and the job of the Department of Agriculture is to, if a ride is being put into operation, whether it's a permanent ride like this or any of our travel rides that go into the state fairs, we are brought in to inspect, to make sure that the ride was put together per the manual. So we rely on the manual that is created by the operator and by the manufacturer. So if the manufacturer says, there needs to be 5 bolts in this part of the ride, our people go through the manual and we make sure that there's 5 bolts in. We do not and don't have authorization and certainly don't have the expertise, and it's not part of our job to say whether or not the ride was safe to begin with. That is an affidavit that comes from an engineer that gives us, this ride has been inspected, this ride is deemed safe, and so we don't have the authorization to question the engineer and the company itself on whether or not they've gone through those safe protocols. So we come in, and once that's done and once the manual is in place, before a ride opens, whether again it's a permanent ride or a traveling ride, we come in to make sure again that it's put together based on the manual. Now we then get, if a complaint comes in from somebody who has been a ride owner or a rider, a participant, or if there's something that alerts somebody, will come in, they'll maybe send a complaint to us. We will then follow through on what those complaints were and see if there's things that need to be taken or steps, or if somebody finds that there was an issue with the ride, that they're not following protocols. So that is when we come in. If there's an actual problem with the ride, that's the only time that we can come in and stop it, which is what we have done. And so our authorization in the grand scheme of things, is not as large as I would like it to be. As the regulator, we are only there to make sure that they follow the protocols from the actual manufacturer. And unfortunately, in fact, Florida is the most stringent on our rules and regulations, if that should give you any cause of concern for any rides outside of the state of Florida. So we've got the most in-depth statutes to oversee these rides and inspections. And certainly, and this is the big problem with this operator, is that without any causation to show that there was absolute negligence with how they operated the ride, we can't just do a blanket unless we find that there was actual problems with the operator. So again, that's part of this investigatory process that we are going through.
got it.
Now, Commissioner, would any of your findings be, I guess, a catalyst for strengthening your power, or
I'm sorry.
would any of your findings thus far be a catalyst for strengthening your power in regulatory sense?
You know, I certainly think that we do need more oversight and more regulations, but we're also, if that is the case, need to have the legislature also give us more financial resources to hire experts on staff for these things. Because all we have, again, are our engineers, who are incredible. The people that are out inside the Department of Agriculture who inspect these rides are some of the best in the world. They've got masters in engineering. They are retired veterans. They are incredible. But some of the additional oversight, such as seeing whether or not it was safe to begin with, those are the types of expertise that are outside of the responsibility of the department and outside the expertise of the people that work for the department. So certainly as we're going through this process, we are doing a huge due diligence internal review of what recommendations we would give to the legislature to increase any of that authorization or have more opportunity to really come out and put some additional regulations on the operators and the rides. So yes, I think that always more hands on deck and more oversight on anything of this magnitude is always going to be a welcomed addition to our responsibilities.
I'm sorry, before we take questions from the media, I just want to make sure that we have all our questions answered from the people that are here, the community that wanted to address this. Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a question. So, with this investigation, it's investigating the company, I understand, but is it only this ride, or is it the other rides that they have as a whole?
We only have authorization to look at this ride. And based on the operations of this ride and what they did in regards to this ride, would then potentially opening us up to dealing with the other rides that they operate here in the state of Florida. But our investigation has to look at the management of this ride. That's the only authorization I have, is to do it on this ride, what happened, what went down. And then, of course, based on the investigation, if we find that there was something else to increase our regulatory authority, or there's other things that we say, well, that may not have prevented it, but that's probably a good idea that we should have this or that. And then that's when we get back to the legislature. And certainly if we find in our investigation that there was a significant problem with the operator, then we can then go a step further and look at, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other? Yes, sir. Oh.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Commissioner, you mentioned the serious look that your engineers took at the structure from just, an engineering perspective. What kind of authorization does the department have to look at the human processes and the human management side of things when it comes to, operating these rides?
That's part of the investigation. That is, we all know at this point that the magnets were altered. So then the question becomes how and who and why. And so certainly those are part of what we are looking through, because we do not want this to happen again. That is my promise to the people of this community and to people of our state, that we are going to do everything possible to look into every aspect of the ride malfunctioning, who made those authorizations, and make sure that we are doing what we can. And certainly, if we find negligence when it comes to, and that's going to be again up to the, we have very little, punitive oversight. We can certainly pull rides down if they have violated. They always, and here's the other thing too that they missed, is that if there has been any alterating of the ride, they should have come back to us to say, we moved these magnets, and they should have come back to us and said, we made these changes, will you come back out and inspect? They failed to do that too. So we would have potential ramifications on them on that point. But so these are kind of things that we are seeing, whether there was a mismanagement or mishandling of some of those internal decision making. Again, and that goes into the bigger picture of, who made those choices, who made the authorization. Was the people on the ground? Was it manufacturer? Was it the operator? And that's going to get sorted out. And we're going to do everything we can, because if we find certain things happened, then we have other opportunities to go after.
So, any other questions from the people, the community? Okay. Yes.
Maybe not a question, but just a statement. And thank you again for going through what your office can and can't do. That was some great clarity that you gave today. But speaking on behalf of at least a certain sect of the community, what is punitive in our perspective and what hurts in our perspective is to shut this ride down so that they can't make any more money. That's what's punitive. I understand that this company, their goal is to make money, and their goal is to make money off of tourists and Floridians. And the best way to send a very clear message that you can't be negligent and people can't die on your ride is to shut them down so that they cannot make any more money. So thank you.
So the commissioner has another obligation, and so I don't want to interrupt your schedule. I know you have to be somewhere else. There is a press conference after this gathering that I will conduct, and I can answer questions, but I know the commissioner has to leave, so if you want to make a last statement. And then
The point, obviously, of us convening this was to listen, was to hear what's going on the ground, and to know that we're not going anywhere. That we are very engaged, very hands-on on this investigation, and want to get the same answers you all do. And I can tell you that no matter how long this is going to take, we're going to get to the bottom of everything. That is my commitment to this community and to honor his loss, our loss. It is by making sure that we are doing everything possible. I wouldn't be coming back here being transparent to the people of our state if we didn't have that commitment. And so know that as this investigation goes on, we will continue to come back, we'll continue to give information, we will continue to be transparent. There's nothing that we are hiding here. Trust me, I am talking to my general counsel on a weekly basis to make sure that there's been what updates are out there, what we can give out, what are my powers. I am constantly, every time I'm learning something new every single day about what my powers are, what authorizations, because I'm asking the same questions. Know that I'm asking the same questions that you are asking and wanting to get answers from what authority I have in this conversation. And so I'm asking those questions, I'm pushing the envelope, and I'm going to do everything possible to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And that is my commitment to you all. And then continuing to come back and answer questions. And we are being, cooperating with all the attorneys, giving them whatever information they need from us. And as soon as we get information, we are disseminating it as fast as possible. We want the same answers you do.
Commissioner, in a sentence, just kind of let us know, because the last update that we received from the state was back in April, and here we are in June, getting close to July. Can you tell us exactly where you are in this investigation to give these families?
Well, we've gone through that. We know that the autopsy report came out last week. If I remember, that's last week. And so that's where we are. We are continuing to look through them. There's no new information to hand out yet. We are still going through the process. We are working with the attorneys, and as soon as we get new information, we're going to disseminate that.
Commissioner, it sounds like from what you're saying is if the ride owner were to correct any deficiencies that are found, that theoretically they could reopen under the law, under the power that the department has. That if the problems that you identify are corrected, then they could reopen the ride.
Not necessarily. So there are. The problem is that we don't even know what was the ultimate cause and what was the causation. That is certainly going to be something that is what isn't being investigated and looked through, and what the jury and what trials are going to be for. Is to see who was responsible for what, when, where, how, and so based on that, we have certain authorizations dealing with the individual ride. The question then becomes, what other rides would come under my purview that may not be necessarily this ride in particular? So we are doing everything we can to make sure, because we don't want this to happen again. And so it doesn't mean that if they did X, Y, and Z to fix this ride, that means that they can go back up and operational. Because again, we need to take additional precautions. And so we are going to do what we can. These rides are shut down indefinitely, period. Like, they are shut down indefinitely, and we're going through the process. And
hold on. We're gonna let her leave, and we appreciate you for being here again. Thank you for the conversation. We were going to have the press conference outside, but I'm just gonna start this in a couple minutes, and I'm going to walk her out. So and we'll start there. Thank you.
So that's
Thank
the
you.
answer to slingshot group. They sent out a statement earlier this week that they want to reopen the slingshot.
With your approval, they said, do you have approval when it comes to that other slingshot expansion?
They've got to come and ask for permission first.